welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to turn a subscriber's OC character into an art doll. Now, I get a lot of commissions, but I don't get a lot of OC characters, so I thought this would be a fun video to do. Also, you can kind of see the process of how I turn an image given to me for a commission into an actual art doll. Anyways, I'm going to pop it up on the screen. This is Cage. He is a wolf-dragon hybrid, and we're going to be turning him into an art doll today. Anyways, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that I need to work on is the clay. I'm going to make a base real quick and then we can start sculpting. Once I have my base set up, I'm then going to start covering this completely in clay and blending everything together. Once I have it blended, I can then start working more on the shape of the head. So I'm going to start defining the shape of the muzzle and just kind of figuring out where the cheekbones and other facial features are going to go. Once I have that basic shape laid out, I can start working more on the details. The first facial feature that I'm going to work on is going to be the eyes. So I'm going to roll out some balls of clay, I'm going to make sure they're nice and even, and then I'm going to place them on the face where I want the eyes to go. Once I have those placed, I can then start building up clay under and over the eyes to make the eyelids and any other features that need to be kind of closer to the eyes. So I'm going to add some lumps just above the eyes to make the brow, and then just kind of blend everything together and clean it up. One little feature around the eyes that you don't really see in the reference photo is there is a scar going through the left eye. So it's just a simple line scar running from the top of the eye down to the bottom of the cheek. And I'm just going to kind of make this light. I don't want to make it really gory or anything like that. It's just going to be a simple scar. So I'm going to dig in a little bit and define the shape of that. The next facial feature that I'm going to work on is going to be the mouth, and then I'll work on the nose. For the mouth, I'm going to take a strip of clay and I'm going to use this to make the upper lip. So I'm going to kind of flatten it out and then I'm going to lay it across the muzzle, figure out where I want that to go, make sure it's nice and even, and I'm going to blend it upwards into the face. If you want to do a bottom lip, you can do basically the same thing. You just want to kind of have it a little bit tucked under the top lip. And then for the nose, I'm going to take a little bit more clay and I'm going to add it to the front of the snout, blend that in, and get a basic shape laid out, kind of like we did with the rest of the face. I'm just kind of defining the nose a little bit more. And then once I have that done, I'm going to take my tools and I'm going to start digging into the clay and making the openings for the nostrils. So I'm going to start by making two little holes nice and evenly on the front of the nose, and then I'm going to use my tools to kind of open that up and make the basic shape of the nostrils, because they aren't just simple round holes, they do have a lot of shape to them. Now, one thing that I tend to not do too often with my art dolls is make the ears out of clay, but this time around I wanted to give it a go. So for this, I started out with some balls of clay roughly about the same size. I shaped them into more of a cone/triangle shape, and then I smushed them onto the sides of the face where I needed the ears to go. I blended everything together and I kind of worked them to make them a little bit thinner, but I didn't want them too thin because I don't want them fragile, so I was really careful about making them thick enough so that I wouldn't have to worry about them breaking. And then once I was done adding the ears to the face, I moved on to cleaning up the edge around the base of the head and adding a rough texture to the clay. Now, I'm not going to add a fur texture to this because I'm going to actually add fur trimmings and make it all fluffy later. So I'm just going to rough up the surface, that way it's easier to attach the fur later. A smoother surface tends to be kind of harder to glue the fur on, and I just kind of like it a little bit bumpy. And then once I like how our clay face looks, I'm going to put it in the oven for about 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. So while our clay head is baking, I'm going to move on to working on the clay feet. For this, I'm going to start out with 4 even amounts of clay. I'm going to kind of roll them out into a more of a cone shape, not super cone-like, just a little bit, and then I'm going to kind of push them onto the counter so I have a flat portion for the bottom of the foot. Once I have a basic shape for all 4 of the feet, I'm then going to add some wires to the very top of them. These are going to be used for 1, so we can have something to hold on to while we're sculpting, and 2, to add them to the wire frame of the body later. Next, we need to define the shape of the toes. So I'm going to add some more clay to the fronts of the feet, and then I'm going to break them up into 4 toes. So I'm just going to roughly break them up. I'm not going to really separate them with a straight line. I'm just kind of more giving an indent. So I'm going to break these up, and one thing I recommend when you're making toes for paws is to make the outer toes a little bit smaller than the middle toes. It just looks a little bit better. Now, one thing that the front feet are going to have slightly different than the back is we're going to add a little extra lump for their dew claw. It's kind of like a thumb on the side of the foot. And then I'm not going to be doing the claws out of clay. I'm going to be using some Instamorph for this. So we're just going to make some little indents in the front of the toes. That way we have a place to put the claws later when they're done. And then lastly, I'm going to add some paw pads to the very bottoms of the feet. So if you don't want to do this, you honestly don't have to. It's something you really wouldn't see, but I'm going to add a little bit extra detail to it. Plus the buyer wanted these to be a gold color, so I'm going to have them painted gold afterwards too. So I'm just going to take some balls of clay and I'm going to lay them out on the bottom of the foot, kind of shape them into individual toe pads and then the base pad at the very bottom. And then once the paw pads are done, we're going to put these in the oven as well for about 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. Now one other clay thing that I needed to make for our creature is some spikes. These are also not really seen in the reference, but they are going down the back of the wolf dragon. So these are going to be red. I didn't film making these because there was just so many of them, but they're basically just little rolled out pieces of clay. And then once our other clay pieces are out of the oven and have cooled to touch, I can start painting those as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the clay face first, and I'm going to primer it completely black. I am going to add some highlights here and there, but I'm not going to add a ton of detail other than maybe around the mouth and the eyes and nose, mainly because we are going to be furring the face and I don't need to add all that extra detail. So once I have the basic color of the face laid out and a little bit of highlights added, I'm then going to move on to painting the details. So I'm going to start with the nose first, and I'm just going to paint it a nice solid red color. After that, I'm also going to paint the inside of the ears and the inside portion of the scar red as well. And then for the eyes, these are going to be very interesting. The one that's around where the scar is going to be a silver color, and then the other eye is going to be a gold. So I'm going to mess around with my silver and gold paints and try and get a basic color laid out, and then I'm going to add the pupils. For the pupils, I'm just going to make a darker color of both the gold and the silver to go over it. And then once I'm done with the face, I'm going to move on to painting the feet. So I've got all 4 of these ready, and I'm just going to be primering them a black color. I'm going to make sure everything is completely black. I'm going to let it dry, and then I can add some highlights to the fronts of the feet. And then the only other thing that we need to paint for our feet are going to be the paw pads, and these are going to be gold. Now I did say that the claws were going to be made out of Instamorph, and then they were going to also be red. So these, I guess I forgot to record them. My bad, guys. I'm really sorry. I was working on this piece when working on a lot of commissions, so I guess I just honestly forgot to record this. That or I lost the footage. But you'll see the claws later on when I start putting everything together. Okay, so we have our clay pieces painted and they're basically ready. So now what we're going to do is we're going to work on some sewing. So I have a pretty simple pattern for the body. There's going to be a long tail and there's also going to be a pair of wings. So there's a decent amount of sewing, but it's not too bad. Okay, so the first bit of sewing that I'm going to work on is going to be the sides of the body. We have a left and right, and each piece has a black portion, which is the main body color, and a yellow portion, which is going to be the belly. So I'm going to sew the yellow fur to the black fur, and then I'm going to take the strip of fabric, which is going to be the tail. This fur also runs down the back of the wolf, so what we're going to do is we're going to sew the left and right pieces onto each side of this strip of fabric. Then we're going to move on to the legs. So each leg has an inside portion and an outside portion. So we're going to sandwich these 2 pieces together, and then what we're going to do is we're going to sew down the fronts of them only. So I'm going to do this with the front and back legs. Now we're going to work on the wings. So I don't have the fabric cut out for the wings just yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take our pattern and I'm going to trace around it. Now I do have my fabric folded over, so once I have my pattern traced out onto the fabric, I'm just going to pin everything together, and then I'm going to sew these together with my sewing machine. Once I have them sewn together, I'm then going to cut them out. Next, I'm going to flip the wings right side out, and then I'm going to kind of sketch out where the fingers of the wings are going to go and the main body of the wings. I'm then going to follow those lines that I sketched out with my sewing machine. Now I'm using a white pencil, so all of this will wash off really easy. Okay, so now we have all the different pieces that we need to make our art doll. We can start putting it together. So I'm going to start with a wire frame. I have a very simple one, and I'm just going to start taking the fabric for the body and putting it over the wire frame. So I'm going to cut some holes for the wires for the legs, and then I'm going to run those wires through those holes and kind of have the body fabric over the wire frame. Then I'm going to take our clay head and I'm going to glue this to the wire for the neck. Once that's dried, I can take the fabric for the neck and glue this around the base of the head. Once the head is in place, I can then start sewing and closing up the body. Now while I'm doing this, I am going to stuff it as I go. So I'm going to stuff, sew until the body is closed up. Once we have the main body put together, I'm then going to take my hair trimmer and I'm going to trim the fur for the body. Just kind of clean it up. It's really shaggy and we're going to kind of trim everything again later, but I want to be able to see the fabric and it just makes it a lot easier to sew everything else onto the body this way. So once the body is shaved, we can add the wings and the legs. So I'm just going to start with the wings and I'm going to slide these onto the wires for the wings. Once I have them slid into place, I'm then going to sew them into place on the body. Next, I'm going to add the front legs. So I'm going to take the fabric for the front legs and the under portion of the leg is going to go under the wire. We're going to sew that in place. And then we're going to take the outer portion of the leg and we're going to sew that over the wire, kind of more the shoulder blade portion. Basically, you just want to make sure the wire is inside of that fabric. Then I'm going to take our clay legs that are for the front legs, make sure you're using the correct ones, the ones that have the dew claws, and we're going to add these to the wireframe for the legs. So I'm just going to wrap them in place with a thinner gauged wire, and then I'm going to take the fabric for the legs and I'm going to glue them around the bases of the clay feet. Once that's in place and has dried, we can then start stuffing and closing up the back of the legs. Once I have the legs put together, I'm then going to trim those as well, just like we did with the body. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the back legs. I'm going to sew the fabric into place, add the clay legs to the wire frame, close everything up and put it together, and then we're going to shave those as well. While I'm shaving the back legs, I'm also going to just go over the entire body and clean everything up. Now we're going to work on our final details. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start furring the feet and the face. So I'm going to take a little bit of my fabric glue and I'm going to paint it onto the surface that I want to add fur to, and then I'm just going to take some fur trimmings and kind of just push it into place and make sure that it's where I want it, adjust it, and then we're going to have to let this all sit and dry until it's completely dry before we can do anything else. And then once that fur has dried, we can then move on to adding the hair. So we need to add some of that purple hair going into the front of the face, mainly covering the left eye that has the scar. So I'm just going to cut some strips and pieces that are going to lay out the way that I want them. I'm going to glue them into place, and then I decided to take some of my fabric glue and kind of use it like mousse to make the hair stay in the position that I want it. So I'm just going to kind of add it to the fur a little bit with my paintbrush and just adjust it and then make sure it's in the position that I want it, because once this dries, it's not moving anywhere. And then lastly, we need to add the red spikes going down the back of our wolf dragon. So these are going to go all the way from the back of the neck all the way down to the tip of the tail. So I'm just going to comb the hair out of the way, and then I'm going to glue my spikes in place on the body. So I'm going to start from one end and work my way all the way down until I get to the other end. And honestly, I kind of made a few too many spikes, but that's okay. Rather have too many than not enough. Okay guys, and this is Cage, our wolf dragon. I think he came out really good. I can't wait to send him off to his new owner so they can enjoy him. I had a lot of fun actually using the fabric glue as mousse. It was a bit messy, but it did work out quite well. It's nice and sturdy, so these little locks won't move at all. Well, they wiggle, but they don't move out of place or anything. Anyways guys, like I said at the beginning of the video, this piece was a commission, so it's not for sale. I gotta box it up and send it off to its new owner, but I do have a bunch of other art dolls in my Etsy shop if anyone is interested in buying anything, and I'll leave a link down below for that. Also, you'll find a bunch of other links down there for art supplies and stuff that I like to use to make my art dolls. These are affiliated links, so if anyone buys anything through them, it does help support the channel. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!